Hi everybody, my name's Lily and I'm the book reviewer behind Utopia State of Mind, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my January wrap-up. I've actually filmed this twice, and when I first filmed this, I had all of the books and all of the things that I made, and now the second time, I have barely any of the books and none of the things I made, so this is going to be a little bit different. In terms of how January was, it was a mixed bag. There were some parts that were disappointing, and then it was very stressful on other ways. I was able to go to London, which was fun. I will insert a little vlog thingy of London, a link down below. But yeah, in general, it was kind of, I don't know, I feel like the beginning of the year is always hard. I feel like there's all this pressure to make goals and stick to them and all of these different things and to sort of get in the mind of kind of changing your life. And then later on, you're kind of realizing, well, how do I make this happen? Are they attainable? Etc., etc. So I just feel like the beginning feels of January can be sort of aspirational, but then a little bit demoralizing. And so that's where I am. In terms of what I made in January, I made a smitten. I don't have it anymore, but it's one of these. I will link down below the pattern for that one. Also, you will be able to see it, I think, in my upcoming video about the things I made in 2025 and my plans for 2026 knitting wise. And I've started, or wait, did I start? I can't remember exactly when I started it, but I'm not done with it, so that's why it's not in the wrap up for now. But I do think that I started at least the Seasons of Change jumper. So that's kind of what I made. I also made a bunch of earrings. I will link down below my January wrap up. I finally made my second Death of Lock earrings. These ones took forever because I sourced these little resin charms, and I didn't make those, but then I also had to get these cutters printed, like these little cookie cutters for the hand specifically, and the dagger printed, and so I did, and I finally made them, and I was able to give them to VL Bovolino Tori, the author of Second Death of Lock in London. So it was really great in terms of making stuff, but I'm going off of the high of making things, and I'm trying to really be very committed to all of my goals in terms of the projects for knitting and crocheting, well, mostly knitting, that I want to finish, the earrings projects that I want to have done by April when I go to BookCon, and things like that. So that's what I made. What I read, I don't have the majority of the books anymore. The only two that I have left are these ones, but I don't have the rest of them anymore. In terms of statistics, it was an interesting month. I read 48% queer books, like 48% books with queer characters as main characters, and 44% of them featuring BIPOC main characters. So not exactly what I thought. So normally it's 50 and 33, and this time it was 44 and 48. So the stats are a little bit different, which I find really intriguing. I'm always reading books for the next month, what I'm trying to at least, so to keep on schedule. So this was one of those weird months in which it didn't really correlate to what I was reading or even thinking about for February or the next month, but I had a few favorites that I want to chat about, so let me just get into them. The first one is like a favorite with a little asterisk sign, and I will explain that right now. It is The Wolf and the Crown of Blood. I read this before I went to London. I was really sort of bogged down in, as I said, this cycle of kind of ambition and demoralization and like all of those things. And so The Wolf and the Crown of Blood really took me out of that. I was super obsessed and wanting to read it. Basically, I wanted to put down everything else I was reading and read it. It gives a very much Carissa Broadbent, Serpent, and the blah on the blah kind of vibe. And I really enjoyed that. I also really enjoyed the way that talks, the world building, and the way that talks about kind of religious trauma, and sort of the world building in terms of these deity figures. Basically, in the book, the main character, she is continuously sacrificed in order, for her god, her deity, and she kind of gets resurrected every time. And it obviously leaves an incredible toll, and she's kind of sick of it. So, what ends up happening through a variety of events, which I will not spoil, is sort of like a Beauty and the Beast mortal enemy kind of thing, where she ends up spending forced proximity a lot of time with her mortal enemy, essentially, but also like not her specifically necessarily at the beginning, at least. Well, not necessarily her specifically mortal enemy, but he's certainly the mortal enemy of her family, and sort of that kind of what her family has done to these deity like creatures, basically. I really enjoyed the world building. I really enjoyed the idea of a religion on sacrifice. And I like the idea of a connected world. And that's what's going to be the series. So, I didn't rate it a full 5 stars. I had to round this one, basically. I round up always when I can. I have a new rating system, which breaks down 5 to 6 criteria based on the genre. I do the math, and then I sort of have a rating, and then I have a good read / like a review rating. Then, though, I was in London and chatting a little bit more about the story and things that happened in the story, and I realized actually there are a lot of things in the story where it's fun. It's entertaining, it's fun, it's obsessive, but it's not, when I think about some of the things that happened and some of the tropes that were in there, I was thinking like, like, I don't want to say cringe because I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum, and I certainly had a really fun time reading it. I was obsessed. But some things where I look back and I'm kind of like, oh, that was hilarious that happened that way, in a kind of almost plot hilarity way. So I'm still kind of sitting with how I feel about this now at this point, a month later. And that's why I think the mid-year check-ins and the end of the year wrap-ups are so important, to kind of see what has really held the space of time, not only in the sort of what has decreased in rating for the space of time, but also what has increased for the space of rating in that time, because things go both ways. So I'm not sure if you'll see this later, but it was just so fun and bloody, and there's very much this kind of this star-crossed lovers vibe to it. There's also sort of trials to it, and this sort of definite prove your love, it's us against the world. Like, it was just so fun. It brought me back to the same feelings I had when I finished the first Carissa Broadbent book, and so I just really had a fun time with it. It's really made me sort of confront my own feelings about 5 stars and reading and everything like that. And I'm thinking about kind of like reading a book for pleasure, and then reading a book critically, reading a book, and all of these different layers to it, which I don't really think that I have time to cover in this wrap up. But anyway, it was a 5-star read. I'm not sure if it will stay a 5-star read, because it really has had me sort of come to terms with what I'm looking for in a book, how I view a book critically, how I view a book after I'm done reading it, all of those different things, which, as I said, I'm not really fully set on yet how I feel, but I will let you know when I do. But the other 2 YA books were 5 stars, no notes. The first one that I finished was Queen of Faces. Chloe Gong blurbed Queen of Faces, and so I bumped this up on my TBR, and I'm so glad I did, because I'm obsessed. This was one of the rare books where I would start telling people who are not readers, who will never read it, and who are just normally in my life, all about the book. And while I will say there are some world building rules of the magic which I'm not really sure about, which was glaringly obvious when people asked me this, I really loved it. I love the concept of body jumping. Basically, the main character in this world of body jumping, her body is kind of has this disease, and so her solution to that, because she cannot afford to buy a new body, that's kind of the way that this works, is to get admitted into this magical academy, because she also has magic, and then they will give you a new body, but she doesn't quite get there, and so that kind of sets off this chain of reactions. She ends up becoming essentially kind of a servant or a second to, like, an assistant to one of the students there. And the idea is that if she does really well, she could potentially be admitted and she'd kind of shadow the classes. So that's kind of the idea behind it. But then what ends up happening and unfolding is this really gorgeous world building about these politics, the betrayal in politics, propaganda. Like, unfolds into this story about magical ambition and power and what you do with the power. And, you know, if you're a monster, if you're a villain, if you're a hero, what it means to be all of those different things, body jumping, about gender, about class. Like, it just ends up being this book that really blooms, evolves, and unfolds before your eyes. And I really, really loved it. I cannot wait for the next book, because I think it's a series. So I love that one so much. And the next one, or the last one, is Until the Clock Strikes Midnight. I was expecting to love this because I've loved all of Alicia Dow's books, but this one is special. Basically, it gives kind of like a fairy tale meets Fairly Odd Parents vibe. We have our two characters. One is a fairy, and she's sort of responsible for happily ever afters. The other one is responsible for ordinary ever afters. So these are just lives that are secure. They don't take risks, and they're just kind of basically content and okay. So they are trying to get a place on the council, and the main last test of this is to have this one human and try to get her to either an ordinary after or happily ever after. And then, of course, there's a rivalry, a rivals to lovers, there's fake dating. It is so, so cute. But I think what I also really loved about it is that it hits all of these emotional highs and lows. It also kind of talks about not only discrimination and misconceptions, but it also talks about kind of who deserves a happily ever after, who deserves to have their life impacted in that way. Just because the system has always been this way, should it always be this way, is also another big theme in this book. And I just really loved the world. I wouldn't normally say that I'd want to visit a fantasy world, would not want to visit Wolf in the Crown of Blood or Queen of Faces. I would not survive, but in Until the Clock Strikes Midnight, I would want to go. I think that I would have a really fun time. I love the idea of the fairies. I love the idea of this kind of godparent bureaucratic kind of system. It's really fascinating to me, and so I just had a really fun time with it. I expected to love it, but I loved it so much more than I expected. So those were my favorites of January. Please let me know down below what some of your favorites were. I will see you in the next video. Please have a really great rest of your reading day, week, month, and year. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.